His story begins, today. Shingo Uryu. He received news that his little sister Sakuno got lost again. Shingo immediately told her to send a photo, so he could quickly figure out her location and come pick her up. However, Sakuno didn't understand what he meant. Fortunately, Shingo still managed to guess where she might be. He hurried to the wooden post where they used to meet. But when he arrived, Shingo was confused because Sakuno was nowhere to be seen. He called her and learned that she had followed a strange creature. And now he had no idea where his sister had gone. Shingo is a true little sister fanatic, so he didn't get angry at all. Shingo gently told Sakuno to stay where she was, and to describe the scenery around her so he could understand. Suddenly, while they were talking, Sakuno's phone ran out of battery. At that moment, it also began to rain, as if the heavens understood Shingo's anxious heart. Just as he was worrying about losing contact with his sister, Shingo unexpectedly received a call from a girl named Irie, who happened to be lost with Sakuno. He listened as she described the surroundings, and Shingo figured out their location. He then gave Irie directions to bring Sakuno to meet him at a nearby park. So they talked on the phone while walking there. Shingo heard that throughout the entire journey, Irie was always the one who comforted and encouraged Sakuno. When Irie and Sakuno suddenly appeared from the bushes, it startled Shingo, but it was unclear whether he was shocked or simply frozen by Irie's beauty. Shingo quickly regained his composure, and thanked Irie for helping Sakuno. Irie also didn't forget to thank Shingo for giving her directions. Even though they had just met, it seemed like Irie and Sakuno had already become close friends. The next morning, Shingo woke up to find that Sakuno had already prepared breakfast. She also informed him that their parents would be away on a business trip for a while. After the meal, the siblings headed out together to the opening ceremony. On the way, they happened to run into Hayata, who was Shingo's best friend. However, their destination today was not the familiar Kagami Academy, but the lively Yuahime Girls Academy. In front of Shingo was a long line of young girls, which made him feel a bit overwhelmed. Perhaps from now on, he would have to get used to this scene, because the two schools had reached a merger agreement, and the three of them were among the selected students, chosen to participate in a 10-month trial at Yuahime. As soon as they stepped into the prestigious girls' school, the trio encountered a strange maid named Angelina. Shingo found her amusing and decided to play along with her act. Unexpectedly, this made Angelina extremely excited. She believed that Shingo was a descendant of royal nobility. On their way to the meeting spot, the three of them were amazed by Yuiheim's luxurious architecture. Looking out the window, Hayata and Sakuno felt something familiar about the ribbon-wearing creature outside. Meanwhile, Shingo was completely captivated by a purple-haired girl. In the auditorium, while the Kagami students chatted excitedly, Sana, a student from Yuahime, was trying to calm down her supervising teacher, because she was too nervous to face the male students. Suddenly, Irie angrily pulled her mother, who also happened to be the school principal, into the hall. Upon seeing Shingo and Sakuno, Irie immediately switched to her gentle mode, but then firmly declared, "Yuahime will always be a girls' academy, and I will not welcome any male students here." She was intelligent, serious, yet also very cold. Irie was the ideal role model for the girls at Yuahime. Therefore, after her statement at the opening ceremony, the Kagami students began to realize they were gradually being isolated. At that moment, Shingo didn't want things to get worse, so he tried to start a conversation with Irie, but she responded coldly and quickly walked away. A while later, as he went to the restroom, Shingo was shocked to find Irie there too. He suddenly remembered, Yuahime only had girls' restrooms, so Shingo quickly apologized, but Irie didn't seem to accept his apology. During PE class, Shingo told Hayata that there was nothing for boys at Yuahime. Not even a proper changing room, they had to change clothes outdoors. He hoped Hayata would do something in his role as the student council president. But Hayata was helpless about the situation too. While the two were talking, Angelina suddenly appeared and offered them drinks. Then Sana came over and told them not to worry too much. Despite some girls being against the merger, there were still many others willing to accept it. After class ended, Shingo led the group of boys back to the classroom. By chance, he witnessed an unforgettable scene. Shingo hurriedly shut the door and tried to explain, but no one was willing to listen. At that moment, the door suddenly swung open, and Shingo accidentally fell face first onto Irie. Immediately, he was labeled a pervert. But things didn't stop there. In the next class, while Shingo was solving a problem on the board, he suddenly broke the chalk. As he bent down to pick it up, Shingo unintentionally saw something under Irie's skirt. As a result, even the girls at Uehime started calling him a creep, leaving Hayata at a loss for words. At lunchtime, Shingo happened to run into the strange cat from yesterday and its owner. He now learned that the petite girl in front of him was an upperclassman named Mew, while the strange cat was called Panya. Since she had attended the girls' school since middle school, Mew had very little interaction with boys. That's why she seemed extremely excited, staring at Shingo as if she were observing a rare animal. Then, Mew said that the second-year boys were lucky to have the chance to join the trial classes. Shingo was quite surprised by that comment. When he looked at Mew's expression, Shingo realized she had noticed he was struggling to fit in. She then sat down, gently patted his head, and reassured him that he would soon grow to love this place. At the same time, Mew expressed her desire for them to officially become friends. Perhaps because Sakuno was a girl, she wasn't discriminated against like her older brother. Still, she commented that her brother was very kind to women, and said that as long as Shingo stayed true to himself, everything would be fine. The next day, some of the female students claimed that the boys were rude and immature, and requested that only girls be allowed to attend the academy. However, the principal rejected their request. She argued that co-education would encourage the girls to be more mindful of their behavior and help reduce arrogance, so they could grow into mature and well-rounded women. To promote better integration between boys and girls, the principal decided to organize a special course. She said the course would include 4 subjects in home economics, and that all students were required to participate. This made the male students extremely anxious, as they were afraid they might lose their masculinity after the course. In the roasted chestnut rice cooking class, the boys did nothing but boast and joke around, but Shingo was the only one who sincerely tried to learn and showed skill. So he earned the favor of Sana and the other girls in the group. Seeing that, the other boys started to put in effort as well, gradually creating a more positive atmosphere in class. Since there were no limits on ingredients, each group ended up cooking a large amount of rice. However, the teacher then announced, "If you don't finish it all, you'll fail the class." Hearing that made all the students panic. After a moment of hesitation, the boys sat down, and everyone started eating like crazy. They ate until they couldn't fit another bite. In the end, they barely managed to finish the pot of rice, which deeply moved the girls. The next day, Shingo and Irie were elected class representatives for each school. However, due to his lack of experience, Shingo often made mistakes. This made Irie feel quite annoyed. After class, the two stayed behind to finish their duties. Shingo remembered Irie's bright smile from before, so he tried to strike up a conversation again. But once again, he was only met with Irie's cold and distant attitude. She quickly finished her tasks. Meanwhile, Shingo had to work until late evening to complete his. On his way home, he happened to spot Panya, so Shingo followed it and arrived at Mew's place. Mew was surprised to see Shingo there, and cheerfully introduced the place as the headquarters of the Nuko Club. This was a place that took in and treated injured animals, before releasing them back into the wild. Upon learning that Shingo hadn't joined any clubs yet, Mew invited him to become a member. Shingo realized that working with someone perfectionist like Irie had made him feel very stressed. During break time, while he was resting, Mew came to find him. That's when Shingo found out that Sana was also a member of the Nuko Club. Just then, Sakuno happened to appear. The girls took the opportunity to get to know each other. In another corner, Irie was panicking because Panya had nested on her head. Seeing this, Shingo realized she didn't like animals, so he quickly stepped in to help. Irie was slightly surprised by his gesture, and she thanked Shingo, but her voice was just a little too soft. After lunch break, seeing Shingo surrounded by many girls in class, Irie stood at a distance and quietly watched for a while. Later that afternoon, the two of them worked together again. This time, Shingo had nearly caught up with Irie's pace. He even said he would try harder not to let down Irie's expectations, which made Irie blush uncontrollably. In a moment of silence where neither of them knew what to say, Shingo was about to break the awkward mood, when suddenly Sakuno walked in. Then, Miu and Sana also came in calling for Irie. So the whole group headed home together. On the way, Irie confided in Sakuno, saying, "I can't stand boys." But she just couldn't bring herself to dislike Shingo. Because whenever she was with him, Irie always lost control of her emotions. The next day, Irie suddenly told Shingo, "I'm busy this afternoon." So she wanted to finish their duties during lunch break instead. However, the workload was too heavy. So by evening, they still hadn't finished. Knowing that Irie had something important to do, Shingo volunteered to take care of the remaining work himself. But Irie didn't want to feel indebted to him. So Shingo suggested she tutor him in return. Also because he didn't want Irie to refuse. She understood Shingo's good intentions. So Irie's heart skipped a beat. And she accepted his offer. Before going home, Irie gently smiled and thanked Shingo. By the time Shingo finished the work, it was already late at night. However, the girls were still waiting for him outside. They wanted to go with him to buy discounted goods at a nearby supermarket. After picking their items, the group gathered at the checkout counter. Suddenly, Shingo remembered he hadn't bought hair wax. So he quickly ran back to get it. Unexpectedly, he saw Irie struggling with her budget. Right after that, the three girls also showed up, which made Irie truly flustered. It turned out that ever since entering high school, Irie had moved out to live independently. So she had to work part-time to cover living expenses. And she paid close attention to how she spent money. Because at Uehime Academy, Irie wasn't just the principal's daughter. She was also the role model admired by many female students. Since Irie didn't want to disappoint anyone, she always tried to hide her own vulnerability. At that moment, no one knew what to say. Until it was broken by Shingo's laughter. He said that wasn't really a flaw at all. So Irie had no reason to feel embarrassed. Hearing that, Irie also felt relieved, but she still couldn't help blushing. At Miu's suggestion, everyone stopped by Irie's apartment. The place was quite spacious and tidy. Then, the girls each showed off their cooking skills. And before long, a hearty dinner was served. Eating together with friends, Irie found the meal truly delicious. However, she still hoped everyone would keep today's events a secret. Hearing that, everyone cheerfully agreed. The next day, the whole class was surprised to see Irie having lunch with Shingo's group. After the meal, Irie suddenly brought up their tutoring agreement, and told Shingo to come to her place that afternoon. Hearing that, the other girls immediately misunderstood. So Irie hurriedly invited Sakuno to cover up what they were thinking. However, for some reason, everyone ended up at Irie's place that afternoon. From that day on, after school, the whole group would gather at her apartment. It seemed the classroom atmosphere also gradually changed along with Irie's feelings. She became more pleasant and more attached than ever before. One evening, Shingo happened to discover that Miu was working part-time at a maid cafe. It turned out that since the Nuko Club hadn't been officially recognized yet, the club wasn't eligible for financial support. But in order to keep the club running, Miu had no choice but to take on a part-time job. While the two were talking, Sana suddenly appeared. She aggressively warned Shingo to stay away from Miu. After that day, Shingo learned that Sana actually hated boys. But for some reason, ever since the two schools merged, she chose to play the role of a sweet and well-behaved girl. On the last day of class before the exams, Irie was genuinely surprised when everyone threw her a birthday party. After blowing out the candles, the group shared cake and sang together joyfully, moving Irie deeply. From the bottom of her heart, she thanked the wonderful friends around her. A few days later, the whole class successfully passed the exams. After the celebration party, Irie stayed behind a little longer, thinking about the changes in her heart. Just then, Shingo suddenly appeared. He said he had forgotten to thank Irie earlier, so he wanted to celebrate with her once more. A while later, on their way home, they happened to pass by the place where they first met. In that nostalgic moment, Irie suddenly called out, "Shingo," without using any honorifics, as if she no longer saw him as a stranger. When she got home, Irie's heart was still pounding from what had just happened. She couldn't help but wonder, what is this strange feeling I get whenever I'm around Shingo? At the same time, she wished the weekend would pass quickly, so she could see him again at school. A few days later, Shingo happened to overhear some students saying, "The Nuko Club is illegally keeping animals." Because of this, the school was considering disbanding the club, even though the principal knew that the club only treated injured animals and released them back into the wild. The public opinion made the situation increasingly tense. As Shingo was deep in thought, he was suddenly brought back to reality by the scent of Irie's hair. Without thinking, Shingo complimented, "Your shampoo smells really nice." Irie immediately blushed in embarrassment. At lunch break, as Irie was about to look for something to wipe the desk, Shingo handed her a pack of wet wipes. With just those small gestures from Shingo, along with the comment about her shampoo that morning, Irie couldn't help but think, Shingo really is different from other boys. Meanwhile, the other girls around them noticed the way they addressed each other, and started guessing, Shingo and Irie must be getting closer. After lunch, they saw Shingo heading to the restroom, so the girls quickly gathered and began chatting among themselves. They all agreed on one thing: Shingo was an incredibly thoughtful person. However, Angelina added, "Because of that, my own workload has been decreasing." So she boldly declared that from now on, she would treat Shingo as her rival. As soon as she said that, Angelina suddenly imagined herself dressed as a maid, serving customers, but Sana immediately cut in, claiming that she would be more suited for the role. She even asked to borrow Angelina's maid outfit to try it on. Angelina looked flustered and replied, "That outfit only comes in one size, and, well, the important parts might be a bit too loose for you." Hearing that, Sana's face turned bright red, and in her embarrassment, she started chasing Angelina around the room. Just then, Shingo opened the door and stepped in, and with perfect timing, Angelina crashed straight into him. She suddenly burst into tears and demanded, "Give it back to me," leaving everyone in the room completely bewildered. After class, Shingo went to find Angelina to ask what that had all been about. It was then that he finally learned the truth. Ever since she was little, Angelina had always dreamed of becoming a maid, just like her mother. That morning, when the headband that symbolized her dream fell to the ground, she panicked, thinking her dream was falling apart too. The next day, determined not to lose to Shingo, Angelina ran all over the school looking for tasks to do. She wanted to prove her own abilities no matter what. However, it seemed like no one actually needed Angelina's help. So, with her cleaning tools in hand, she decided to mop the floors by herself. Unfortunately, she slipped and fell. From the way it looked, people around her thought she had wet herself. In a panic, they rushed over to comfort her. After Shingo figured out what really happened, he bluntly told her, "The way you're acting doesn't really match that of a true maid." Hearing that, Angelina felt deeply hurt, but after talking it over with Irie, she came to realize that Shingo only said those words out of genuine concern for her. Without hesitation, Angelina ran off to find Shingo. And then, right in front of everyone, she suddenly declared that she would serve Shingo as her master. Everyone nearby stood frozen, jaws dropped in shock. That night, Angelina even moved into Shingo's house, insisting on taking care of everything for him like a proper maid. Sakuno, unable to just sit by and watch, quickly organized a cooking competition so they could decide how to divide up the responsibilities fairly. Shingo got dragged into being the judge, and he nearly burst from eating too much food. But things didn't stop there. Later, when Shingo went to take a bath, the two girls even tried to offer to wash his back. Thankfully, Shingo had enough self-control to keep anything inappropriate from happening. The next day at school, Shingo arrived looking completely exhausted, clearly still recovering from Angelina's overwhelmingly devoted style of service. But when Shingo saw the joyful smile on Angelina's face, he thought to himself, "I guess a little exhaustion isn't so bad after all." One day, in the school courtyard, Shingo happened to run into Miu. He quickly caught up to her and asked to officially join the Nuko Club. Shingo was honest. He told her that although he had overheard the conversation in the principal's office, that wasn't the reason behind his decision. He simply wanted to help everyone. Just as things were starting to settle into a peaceful rhythm within the club, Sana suddenly burst into the room. Without warning, she grabbed Shingo by the collar and accused him of having impure motives toward Miu. But the moment she found out Shingo had already become an official member, she switched gears and immediately made him run all over the school, posting recruitment flyers for new members. However, When Shingo saw the weird-looking drawing of Panya that Sana had made, he couldn't help but blurt out a comment. That earned him a solid punch from her. Later on, thinking it over, Shingo realized just how much effort Sana must have put in to do everything by herself until now. That night, the principal paid a visit to Shingo's house. She explained that the student council president was currently struggling without Angelina's help. And since Angelina considered herself a professional maid, she couldn't just sit by and watch. So, she had made up her mind. Angelina would return to school and resume her duties. Even though Angelina had returned to school, she still insisted that Shingo was her master. That morning, just as Shingo stepped onto campus, he was shocked to hear that all the recruitment posters they had put up the day before had been set on fire by someone. Without a moment's hesitation, Shingo sprinted toward the scene. He reached straight into the flames, desperately trying to save whatever was left. In the end, he only managed to retrieve 2 half-burned posters. But his fearless determination to protect even that much moved Sana deeply. According to school rules, in order to officially establish a club, they needed at least 6 members and a faculty advisor. But at that moment, the Nuko Club only had 3, and the application deadline was tomorrow. It felt almost impossible, but after witnessing Sana's devotion, how much heart she'd poured into every hand-drawn poster, both Angelina and Sakuno were touched. Moved by her passion, they decided to join. That brought the member count up to 5. As Shingo looked around, he realized that aside from Irie, who was still clearly uncomfortable around animals, only Hayata remained unaccounted for. That afternoon, all the current members of the Nuko Club worked together to make another batch of posters. Then they split up to put them up all around the school. They were hoping to find one final new member. After everyone finished putting up the posters, Shingo and Irie were heading back to class when it suddenly started to rain. The two of them had to take shelter under the eaves next to the main school building. But no matter how long they waited, the rain just wouldn't stop. Seeing that it was still pouring, Irie offered to go home and bring an umbrella. Before she left, Shingo carefully draped his jacket over her shoulders. But in the end, it didn't help much, because both of them still ended up soaking wet. As a result, Shingo caught a cold. The moment Irie saw him return, she immediately made him take a bath before heading home. However, Shingo insisted that Irie was the one who needed a bath more. So the two of them kept arguing back and forth for a while. Until finally, Shingo gave in. However, just a short time after he entered the bathroom, the light in the bathroom suddenly went out. Right after that, Irie came in as well. While they were bathing together, Irie suddenly asked, "Why didn't you invite me to join the Nuko Club?" Shingo answered honestly, "Because I know you don't like animals." So he didn't want to force her into doing something she wasn't comfortable with. After hearing that, Irie didn't say anything, but a subtle joy lit up her face. The next morning, everyone was surprised when Irie suddenly asked to join the Nuko Club. With that, the club finally had 6 members, and was quickly recognized as an official school club. At that moment, everyone was filled with excitement, except for the principal, who was completely taken aback by Irie's sudden change. Shingo was resourceful and thoughtful, so he quickly became skilled at the club's tasks. That evening, as Shingo was getting ready to head home, Miu invited him to go shopping. Shingo was thrilled, thinking he'd get to go out alone with a beautiful girl. But life doesn't always go as planned. My friend, Miu had also invited Sana to come along. After they finished buying supplies for the club's small animals, the 3 of them returned to the clubroom together. There, Miu suddenly suggested that everyone start calling each other by their first names. She wanted to create a more friendly and intimate atmosphere. Sana immediately objected, but the other 2 completely ignored her protest, which made her angry enough to declare, "I will never get close to Shingo." Out of the blue, Sana pulled out a can of cocoa and handed it to Miu. But after taking a sip, Miu handed the can to Shingo, and told him to keep drinking, as long as he didn't mind an indirect kiss. Hearing that made Sana blush bright red, but she didn't know what to say. In the end, all she could do was turn around and run away. The next day, the whole group went into the forest to release a squirrel they had been caring for. Sana was the one most attached to it, so saying goodbye made her feel quite sad. But it was also one of the rare times she didn't refuse Shingo's invitation to come along. That afternoon, As the two of them walked back together, Sana suddenly declared, "I'll only acknowledge Shingo as an official club member if he can turn into a girl and stay away from Mew. But if he can't do that, then he'll have to prove he's worthy of being accepted by me." The next morning, when Shingo arrived at the clubroom, he saw the girls leaving one after another, until only he and Sana were left. As they both wondered what was going on, Shingo suddenly cried out in pain. Turned out he had slept in the wrong position the night before and hurt his neck. So Sana quickly helped him by putting on a medicated patch. The two of them were now in close contact under such an awkward situation. And Sana felt extremely flustered. She had no choice but to pretend and say. Shingo joked that he was smelling bad to cover up how flustered he felt inside. A little later, in the hallway, Shingo suddenly overheard Hayata mention a rumor that he and Sana were dating. He quickly went to ask Sana about it. And that's when Shingo found out the rumor had started with Mew. It turned out that when Mew saw someone like Sana, who absolutely hated boys, being able to talk so naturally with Shingo, and even once calling him kind-hearted, Mew misunderstood and thought the two of them had feelings for each other. Shingo thought that would be the end of the story. But to his surprise, later that same day, Sana walked up to him with an unusually gentle tone. She handed back the handkerchief to Shingo. But that small action only deepened everyone's suspicions about their relationship. After class, Sana asked Shingo to meet her at the park. Suddenly, she suggested that the two of them start calling each other by name. When Shingo brought up the dating rumor, Sana immediately blushed. Right after that, she quickly changed the subject. Because she wanted to hide her feelings for Shingo. She said she would take care of the rumor herself. Unbeknownst to them, not far from where they stood, Irie happened to witness the whole thing. And she completely understood how Sana felt at that moment. The next morning, in the clubroom, Shingo once again made it clear to Mew. He told her the dating rumor was just a misunderstanding. While the two of them were talking, Mew suddenly leaned her head on Shingo's shoulder and fell asleep. She must have been completely exhausted. After days of juggling both club duties and her part-time job. A few days later, Sana happened to find two abandoned kittens right outside the clubroom door. However, none of the members could take them home, so the group decided to temporarily care for them, while trying to find someone who could adopt the kittens. Back at the clubroom, Shingo saw Panya pretending to be the kittens' mother, letting them cuddle up close to her body. At that moment, Mew let out a small sigh. "I wish I had milk for them." Hearing that, Shingo couldn't help himself, and his mind started wandering to inappropriate thoughts. As a result, Sana immediately gave him a warning kick. By chance, Shingo noticed several small wounds on Mew's hand. He asked Sana about it, and she told him the story, the first time Mew met Panya. Panya was still very aggressive and wouldn't let anyone near. At that time, Mew tried to approach the cat, but ended up getting her hand bitten hard, and Panya wouldn't let go. Even though it was painful, Mew endured it, as she gently stroked the cat's head and said, "If it helps calm you down, then it's okay if I get hurt a little." That moment left a deep impression on Sana. She guessed that the scars on Mew's hands came from that incident. Sana silently thought to herself, Mew really is the kind of person who's willing to get hurt just to bring happiness to others. At that point, Sana suddenly turned to Shingo and asked, "What do you think about Mew?" Shingo hesitated for a moment. Then he honestly replied, "When I'm around Mew, I feel very at ease." Hearing that, Sana grew even more curious. "Then what about me?" Unexpectedly, he answered right away, "If we were the same gender, we'd probably be best friends." That answer left Sana feeling deeply disappointed. The next morning, Shingo arrived early at the clubroom. He wanted to check on the two kittens. Shingo was surprised to find out that Mew had spent the night sleeping at the club. Seeing her fast asleep, and noticing the tiredness clearly written on her face, Shingo gently took off his jacket and laid it over her, then whispered, "Don't try to do everything on your own anymore. Let me share the burden with you." Hearing that, Mew didn't say a word, but those words made Mew feel truly warm inside. The two of them simply looked at each other, and the feelings in their eyes quietly began to grow. Meanwhile, outside the room, there was someone else silently feeling sad, and that was Sana. At this point, they still hadn't found anyone to adopt the kittens. During a break, Sana suddenly asked Mew, "What do you think about Shingo?" unexpectedly. Miu's answer was exactly the same as what Shingo had said before. This left Sana unsure how to react. When the two girls returned to the clubroom, they found everyone in a lively debate about what to name the two kittens. However, something strange happened. The female kitten only responded when called either Miu or Shingo. And those names were the ones thought up by the two of them. Sana stood still for a moment, then quietly turned away in a daze. Only Irie noticed the unusual expression on her face. That day, Miu didn't have a shift at work, and Shingo had told her she absolutely had to go home and rest. But after school, when Miu heard her coworker had something urgent come up, she immediately rushed in to cover the shift. When Shingo found out, he immediately wanted to go look for her, but Sana instinctively held him back. However, after remembering what happened that morning, Sana thought to herself, maybe only Shingo was capable of stopping Miu. In the end, Sana smiled and encouraged him, "Go. You should be with her right now." Shingo immediately rushed to Miu's workplace. As soon as he arrived, he called out, "Miu, come home with me." Unexpectedly, at that very moment, Miu suddenly fainted. Luckily, Shingo managed to catch her just in time. With no other choice, he took her back to his house to take care of her. That whole night, Shingo stayed by Miu's side. In the morning, she finally woke up and saw Shingo fast asleep right next to the bed. She gently reached out and patted his head. Suddenly, he woke up with a start. But then both of them immediately blushed when they realized Shingo was still holding Miu's hand tightly from the night before. After that, when Shingo went to get some water, Miu quickly grabbed her phone to check her messages and saw tons of missed messages from her mother. Startled, Miu quickly called her back, then began packing her things to head home right away. Even though she was in such a hurry, Miu didn't forget to give Shingo her phone number, and she told him, "If anything happens to the animals, you must call me." Okay. That afternoon, Miu couldn't help it and ran back to the club. Seeing that, both Shingo and Sana could only sigh. They didn't know what to say either. Right after that, Miss Maki appeared with some good news. She had found someone willing to adopt one of the kittens. But the person only wanted to adopt the white kitten. So the two kittens had no choice but to be separated. After they sent the white kitten off, Miu went home to rest. Sana also returned to the club room and suddenly noticed the black kitten seemed lonely, its eyes constantly looking toward the door. Then Sana suddenly came up with the idea of adopting the black kitten herself. Even though Irie strongly objected, on the way home, Sana hugged the kitten while smiling brightly. She said she would let it sleep in her bed, and even said they could bathe together. Walking beside her, Shingo blushed and turned away awkwardly after hearing that. Suddenly, Sana asked softly, "Are you free tomorrow?" Before Shingo could answer, his phone rang. It was Miu calling. She invited Shingo to visit her house the next day, as a way of thanking him for taking care of her the night before. Hearing that, Sana's face clearly showed disappointment. However, when Shingo curiously asked about Miu's family, but his tone sounded no different from a son-in-law preparing to visit his future in-laws. As a result, he got another kick from Sana. The next day, at Miu's house, while she was baking cookies in the kitchen, Shingo was playing with the cats, when he was suddenly approached by a beautiful woman. She didn't hesitate to call him adorable, and even invited him to hang out with her alone. It turned out, that was actually Miu's mother, and she was just testing her future son-in-law. Luckily, Shingo stayed calm and polite, so she felt somewhat reassured. Just like Shingo had sensed, Miu's mother also admitted that her daughter always tried to carry everything on her own. She hoped that from now on, Shingo could help share that burden with her. Perhaps knowing her daughter was about to come out, she suddenly switched to teasing mode. The moment Miu walked in and saw her mother smiling mischievously, she became anxious right away. So Miu asked Shingo if her mom had tried to seduce him. But it didn't stop there. Miu's mom kept creating chances to tease the young couple, making Miu both embarrassed and frustrated. Their chat went on until late in the afternoon. Miu commented that Shingo seemed to naturally get along well with animals. Thinking about it, Shingo realized it was true. Thanks to that, he'd had the chance to grow close to Miu like he was now. That evening, after saying goodbye to Miu, Shingo suddenly realized he'd forgotten his phone and hurried back. Unexpectedly, he he stumbled upon a very eye-catching scene. Flustered and unsure how to face Miu, her mother gave him a tip. Just greet her naturally when you see her tomorrow. As long as you don't act awkward, it's fine. Just then, Miu suddenly peeked out. I'll walk you out. Once again at the park, the two of them tried to brush off the awkwardness and chatted as usual. Eventually, Miu finally admitted, I won't try to carry everything on my own anymore. I'll trust you and share the burden with you. The next day, when Shingo saw Miu exercising, worried that she might be gaining weight, he accidentally blurted out, I think your waist still looks pretty slim. Sana, passing by, couldn't help but tease. You say that like you've seen everything already. Her comment hit right on the mark, making both Shingo and Miu blush instantly. The more they tried to explain, the more awkward things became. In the end, Miu had to change the subject, bringing up toys for the black kitten. But the box was placed quite high, so Shingo had to help her reach it. When looking at their eyes and gestures, Sana suddenly realized they really have feelings for each other, so she silently turned away. Immediately, she ran outside and cried quietly. There, Sana happened to run into Irie. Sometime later, the pets in the club were gradually returned to their natural habitats. The whole group had to start cleaning the clubroom, because the fish tank and the gravel were quite heavy. Miu asked Shingo to go wash them together with Sana. On the way, Shingo handed his handkerchief to Sana first, which made her really happy. Sana even used the excuse of needing to sterilize it thoroughly to keep the handkerchief and never gave it back. When the two returned to the clubroom, they saw that teacher Maki was already waiting. She said that the issue was, the white kitten, ever since arriving at its new home, had refused to eat or drink. It just kept quietly walking around like it was searching for something. Hearing that, Sana froze. She remembered. The black kitten she was raising had shown exactly the same behavior. Sana guessed that the two kittens were looking for each other, and both Miu and Shingo felt that they couldn't be separated. Sana also decided that she would adopt the white kitten as well. Right after saying that, she was about to run home to pick up the black kitten. Seeing that, Irie hurried after her and stopped her. She emphasized that the names of the two kittens, one belongs to the person Sana likes, and the other belongs to your rival in love. Irie was afraid that if Sana called their names every day, it would only make her feel more heartbroken. However, Sana just smiled and replied, Miu isn't a rival, she's the big sister I love the most. Hearing that, Irie didn't know what else to say, so she quietly let go of Sana's hand. At the clubroom, Shingo asked Miu and discovered a surprising truth. Sana was allergic to cats. Her condition was mild, so she didn't show symptoms while at the club, but living with cats at home would be a different story. Hearing this, Shingo realized that both Miu and Sana were the kind of people who were willing to suffer pain just to care for the creatures they loved. Looking at the now empty room, Miu suddenly thought of Panya and quietly feared that one day, it too would have to return to the wild. She told Shingo about the first time they met. Many years ago. Back then, Panya was very shy, always hiding behind its mother. But the second time they met, the little one was all alone, and even injured. As Miu spoke, she gently smiled. Shingo, unable to hold back his emotions, suddenly hugged Miu tightly. At the same time, he softly whispered words of love. I love you. Miu was momentarily stunned. She stammered and asked again, don't you like Sana? But Shingo gently replied, all this time, I've only loved one person, it's you. At last, Miu smiled and accepted his feelings. In that moment, the two seemed to be lost in their own world, sweet, fresh, and full of happiness. By then, the office door had somehow been left open, and heavy raindrops had begun to fall inside. At the same time, in the park, Sana was sitting and holding the black cat. Shingo, while silently crying under the rain, memories came flooding back, making Sana even more heartbroken. Suddenly, Irie appeared. She quietly sat down beside her, and offered Sana her shoulder. Go ahead and cry. Cry as much as you need. Then from tomorrow on, forget about Shingo. Perhaps those words weren't just meant for Sana, but were also Irie's way of comforting herself. Since that day, Sana hasn't come to the club. Even today, she's been absent from school. Shingo, worried, wanted to call and check on her, but Irie stopped him, saying that Sana only had a slight cold and needed some time to rest. At the end of class, while the office was empty, the newly dating couple took the chance to hold hands. Both of them blushed, but said nothing. After a while, Shingo brought up the upcoming final exams. Miu then invited him over to her house to study together, saying her mom would be out all day, so they could study until evening. However, the next day when Shingo arrived, he still met Miu's mom, and to make things worse, she declared she would act as their sex education tutor. Sana returned to school right on the first day of exams. She wasn't sure whether she was lucky or unlucky. On the way, she told Irie, lately, Cat Shingo kept sneaking glances at Cat Miu. Clearly, those two were up to something shady. Irie laughed and said, maybe it's just someone with the same name as Miu, and you're feeling guilty for no reason. After the first exam, Shingo went back to Miu's house to study again. At close distance, he accidentally caught sight of some interesting spots. Judging from Shingo's bright red face, everyone could probably guess just where he had been looking. Right at that moment, Miu's mom suddenly opened the door, startling them both. After the last exam, Shingo and Sana went to the office to clean up. Shingo thought no one knew about him going to Miu's house, but it turned out Sana had noticed for a while. This time, however, she wasn't mad. On the contrary, Sana smiled and said, you and Miu really suit each other. That sentence surprised Shingo and touched him a little. At the same time, the principal happened to catch sight of Miu's mother, who was secretly following her daughter to keep an eye on her. Though they had been close friends for a long time, the two often quarreled, but they shared one thing in common that never changed. They both always tried their best to be good mothers. Back at the office, Sana suddenly joked, if Miu dumps you after graduation, I'll be ready to take her place. Shingo simply smiled and replied, I would never see you as a replacement for anyone. She had already expected that answer, so Sana just gave a gentle smile, saying she was only joking to test the guy a bit. Then she quickly changed the subject. Have you bought a Christmas gift for Miu yet? If not, let's go pick one together next week. Upon hearing this, Irie sighed, saying that Sana was only hurting herself. But Sana thought differently, that giving her blessings to the two people she cherished was a good thing too. Even though, at the moment, she still couldn't let go of her feelings for Shingo. Meanwhile, when Shingo came to pick up her daughter, Miu's mom finally felt at ease and went home. On the way back, Shingo and Miu shared a pair of gloves. Full of affection, Miu softly said, this Christmas, I want to come to your house. A few days later, Shingo went Christmas shopping with Sana. Although they didn't talk much, he secretly bought her a gift. Shingo gave her 2 stuffed cats, one black, one white. That small gift made Sana feel incredibly happy. On Christmas night, Sakuno said she'd be having an all-nighter with the girls in the club. And she didn't forget to cheer on her brother before leaving. Not long after, Shingo welcomed his girlfriend to his home. Miu had even borrowed a cosplay outfit from the cafe, because she wanted to wear it for this lucky guy to see. At Irie's apartment, after everyone had finished eating, Angelina suddenly shared a shocking piece of news. The school merger was facing serious issues, and there was a possibility it might be cancelled. The mood suddenly turned heavy. While Irie was deep in thought, Sana suddenly interrupted, inviting everyone to the nearby park to play in the snow and lift their spirits. After a while of playing around, they all sat down and started talking about love. Somehow, they ended up making a bizarre agreement that all of them would stay single for the rest of their lives. In contrast to the cold outside, the room where Miu and Shingo were was filled with warmth. The two were so lost in the sweetness of love that they couldn't seem to stop. At the end of the holiday break, Shingo had just finished clearing the snow outside the clubroom. But when he came back inside, he was warmed up by Miu's smile. The love between the two grew deeper with each passing day, unaware that 4 girls were watching from outside. The next day, the group of friends happened to spot a cat that looked like Panya. They came up with the idea to place a hair clip with Panya's scent at the spot where Miu had first met her. Then they all hid and waited. Sure enough, just a few minutes later, Panya's mother and younger sibling appeared. The two quickly sniffed the hair clip and cried out emotionally. Realizing that Panya still had a family, the girls suddenly felt sad, because they knew they would have to say goodbye to Panya soon. But Miu gently smiled and said, "This Sunday, I'll return Panya to her mother." As Miu explained, after graduation, they too would have to leave this place. So they couldn't keep Panya with them forever. That's why it would be best to send her home with joy in their hearts. Miu's strength deeply moved Irie. She decided to persuade the other students, because Irie wanted them to sign the petition supporting the school merger. Seeing her daughter take such action, the principal was incredibly touched, as her daughter had truly grown up. But in truth, Miu wasn't as strong as Irie believed. She simply wished from the bottom of her heart to stay with Panya forever. Now overwhelmed with emotion, Miu burst into tears. Shingo gently stepped forward. He hugged Miu tightly and whispered, "I'll never leave you." That night, Miu confided in her mother, "Raising a cat is really scary. Because no matter how well you take care of them, one day, they'll still leave you." Her mother just smiled gently and said, "Parting truly is painful. But the memories you shared will always live in your heart. Life is always changing. What you need to do is hold on to those memories with joy." That conversation helped Miu begin to understand. The next day, she told Shingo, "I made so many precious memories with Panya. So now, I have to be strong and return her to her family." Today, the whole group went to the place where they had first met Panya. As expected, her mother and sibling appeared again. Panya happily ran off, but halfway there, she turned back toward Miu, as if to say goodbye. Miu held Panya one last time, and gently said, "I'll treasure the memories we shared like a precious gem. And I'll always hold them dear." Then she softly encouraged Panya to go home with her family. The school year came to an end. The school merger was finally approved. Sakuno was excited, because she would get to wear a new uniform. Meanwhile, Sana had now become the president of the Nuko Club. Somewhere else, beneath the blooming cherry blossoms, Shingo and Miu stood side by side. They quietly held hands and made a promise, from now on, let's create many more beautiful memories together. That's the end of today's video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support Oni-chan in making more fun videos. Thank you so much for watching until the very end. Much love always.